for players like DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin, who are the outliers to the rules, these are guys that maybe the NFL likes more than the analytics community. And so we've got guys like Kadarius Toney going into this year's draft, who's supposed to be a first round pick. And in dynasty drafts, he might be going in the third round. Why do we think he's a bust? And are we overfitting? Like, could we be learning some lessons that we didn't learn from the misses like Terry McLaurin or DK Metcalf?
No, I don't think we're overfitting. Like the list of guys like Kadarius Toney that they like, it's just really bad. It's not like we just have one player that hits and then that changes like the rest of history, if that makes sense. Like, it's not like Kadarius Toney is the first bad player to get drafted in the first round. So now we need to consider that he's the exception to the rule, because there's a lot of bad players. And sorry, I don't mean bad. Like, I'm sure that he looks great on film. I mean bad probability, like bad hit rate. Mm-hmm. There's lots of them. There's what do I got here? Yeah, I got 15 players drafted in the first round that have like very bad production profiles. They're not necessarily all really bad production profiles in terms of like college dominator or even breakout age. They're bad production profiles across their career, their collegiate career. So I'm using like age adjusted production, right? So I'm looking for consistent excellence. I want them to dominate year over year over year. I want them to be serial winners. I don't want them to be flash in the pans, because the flash in the pans, you don't really know what you have. They're risky. So we got 15 players. 3 of them actually went on to hit a top 24 season. That's not a very good hit rate. That's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 25%, because I think I called them all maybes. Might be a little higher, a little lower. I don't know. You guys are probably really smart. What's the math on that? 3 divided by 15. It's 1 out of 5, right? 20%.
Yeah.
So Kadarius Toney falls in that bucket if he gets drafted in the first round. If he gets drafted in the second round, like it's like 10%.
It's over.
It's basically over. And these guys, like I said, they're not necessarily like they've never dominated. Like, a lot of these guys have really high college dominators. Like, we have who do we got in here with the high college dominator? Josh Doxson. Josh Doxson has a crazy high college dominator, and he has a crazy low breakout age. The problem with Josh Doxson is that his production was largely fueled by touchdowns. College dominator weights receiving yards and touchdowns at the same level. So it's basically their market share of receiving yards, their market share of touchdowns blended together at a 50-50 rate. It's a way overemphasis on touchdowns. Touchdowns are random. That's why we don't bet on them in fantasy. That's why betting on touchdown regression is usually a way to win in redraft, and you can usually buy low in dynasty based on touchdown regression, or sell high because, somebody gets like a absurd touchdown rate and you're like, well, that's never going to happen again. That affects this. That affects college dominator way more than it should. That's why I don't use touchdowns at all. I'm only looking at yards. And then the other factor with college dominator is that it's often per game, like it's game adjusted. So if these players have high touchdown totals in low amounts of games, now we have small samples combined with unstable metrics, and it just is like a recipe for disaster. And that's what you get with like Josh Doxson. Devontae Parker was like that. High touchdowns. He only played like 8 games his final season. So his college dominator just blows up. I think he had a moderately low breakout age too, though. But again, like, it was touchdown fueled. And then you get into guys like Henry Ruggs. Henry Ruggs didn't produce at all. Never mind. He did nothing. Who was I going to say? John Ross. Like, John Ross didn't do anything until his final year, then exploded. And then voila, we have a first round pick that ran real fast. Does this sound like anyone that we were just talking about? Maybe like he's going to get boosted based on his 40 time in his final season, and he didn't do anything in college up until then.
So what you're saying is that these are like almost the same profile. We can learn from history if we were to just look.
Yeah, we can learn from history if we were to just look. Like, they might be different styles of player. Like, John Ross was a field stretcher, right? So it's a totally different like play style than Kadarius Toney, who's thought of as like this space back or space receiver that's going to make people miss in the open field and more of a slot receiver type. Different styles of receiver, but similar production profiles, similar draft capital, similar athleticism. They might even be similar size. I don't know how big Kadarius Toney is, to be honest. I've kind of just ignored him because he's such a
tiny, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he's just such a like nothing in my profile that I've never really looked that close into him. Like, there's so many better bets you can make than Kadarius Toney in the middle of your second round of your rookie draft. or heaven forbid, if he gets into the back of your first round like John Ross did.